So Debbie says, what's the point of all these guns being admitted? I don't get it. Jasmine asks, I'm so confused with all the guns and all the ammo. How does one make sense of all that stuff? So explain to the viewers why we're seeing all of these guns admitted that didn't have anything to do with the crime.
Well, I'm not entirely sure where the prosecution's going, but I'll speculate. The prosecution is establishing that the type of guns that committed these murders were at and available at the Murdaugh residence. He had those type of guns, he had that kind of ammunition, and I suppose the prosecution's theory is he had other similar guns with which he committed the murders, and I'm interested to hear exactly what the prosecution's theory is for what became of those guns. Presumably he would have had to dispose of them. But remember, we're still in the first few days of the trial, so as this evidence comes in, as some of these exhibits are submitted into evidence, we don't have all of the building blocks yet. We have to let the prosecution do their thing and connect it all.
And let me chime in on that a little bit. After one of the objections by Jim Griffin, Creighton Waters responded and said, we have to show how thorough we were in this investigation. We looked at the ammunition used in this case, the type of weapons likely used. We see 300 blackouts, old ones laying by the house. So this type of ammunition was obviously used on the property at other points in time. We have a missing AR-style blackout rifle. We heard about that in opening statements, so that we didn't see today because it's never been recovered. And so they have to admit all of this evidence to show, look, we tested everything. We went through that house and looked for all the guns. So that's kind of part of what they're doing here. It's tedious and it's kind of, it can be a little boring, but they have to kind of present all this evidence and admit it. This is just part of the process. So it's not all like, Law and Order or whatever and CSI. It's not all sparkly all the time. So that's why they're doing it the way they are doing it. I want to go to you, Gigi. You were in the courtroom with me this morning for a little while. Linda May Callenstein, asks, the crime scene technicians and police are painted as amateurs by the defense. Can the prosecution come back from this? And you and I expected Dick Harpootlian to really attack Agent Worley's processing of the scene and the collection of evidence during the cross-examination, and that's what happened. So what's your take, or what are you seeing as that happened, the cross-examination, and then the redirect? What was your take?
Well, I think it just gives the defense an opportunity to really point out that this crime scene had everybody all over it. And not only that, they're not taking good photographs of what could have been a footwear impression on Maggie Murdaugh's leg. That's a big deal. They were talking about the photographs of Paul's shoe prints not being good enough as far as the quality of the picture. Then you have all these agents on scene. It's dark. Who knows what they're stepping on? So I think that the defense is going to really pound on this. And then further, he got the witness to admit, yeah, there could have been two shooters, which could have introduced some reasonable doubt. So I think it's a really big deal that this crime scene was handled the way it was. It gives the defense something to really grab onto and run with, I think.
And that's what defense attorneys do, right? They attack the evidence. That's how they defend these cases. They look for mistakes because it's the state's job to present a tight case. And so the defense attorneys are doing what defense attorneys do. I'm going to ask you, Tracy, I'm just wondering what you think of this. If there were two shooters involved, could Buster have been a part of the double murder? Tracy, what are your thoughts on that, the possibility of two shooters? And I would assume that SLED would have investigated that possibility at length since there were two weapons used.
So that's a great question. I'm a former FBI agent as well. And so I think in terms of, yeah, I've done both. That's surprising. So I think that, in my opinion, Buster is probably not involved in this crime. He was probably one of the first people cleared as a suspect, to be completely honest. I also think, though, that I've always thought about the possibility of two shooters because what is one of the most unusual things about these crime scenes is the two different kinds of guns that were used. And it really could have been that blackout rifle may have jammed. I don't know. But to use the blackout rifle and then the shotgun, that's unusual. I've investigated cases where there's been multiple shooters using multiple weapons, but I don't know that I've ever seen one where a singular person used two really both weapons that you really can't put on your person. You'd have to actually put down one and pick up the other. I'm not saying there are two shooters involved, but I do think this is something that they could use to really sow some reasonable doubt in the jury.
And Tracy, I'm glad you brought that up because Gigi and I were actually talking about that this morning. I feel like, and Tracy, since you've been a CIA agent and an FBI agent, which, wow, on the resume, I just have to say that, I would think, and this is just me speculating as I've only fired guns at shooting ranges and things like that, and it's been a while, but I would think you'd have to literally have ice water running through your veins, ice water and adrenaline pumping. And you'd almost have to have some training to take out two people at once, being one person using two different weapons. I mean, just the thought process of that, having fired, rifles and guns, since I've done that, I've never fired a shotgun, but I'm just thinking in my head what that would take. Tell us what that would take, because I find it hard to believe, and I'm not saying it's not possible that there could be one shooter, but two certainly seems more likely, even though the state says that's not what happened.
Yeah, and that's an excellent question. I've always felt that really since the beginning of this. So when I served in Afghanistan, I did carry an M4, which is similar to that blackout that we're talking about. And so that's obviously, it's a large weapon, right, that you're wearing on your person. It's not particularly heavy, but it's a large and bulky weapon. So really, the person would have to shoot with that. It doesn't have much of a kickback. And quite frankly, targeting is pretty easy with it. But I don't think you need much training, but you would then need to put it down, go and get the shotgun, which is bulky and difficult to fire if you've never fired it before. Really, shots can go all over the place because of the kickback that gun gives. And they're heavy. So you would need to go and pick that up, and to really see that, someone would have scurried, run all over the place, in trying to get away from that. I think the whole thing is just really interesting. And it really, in my opinion, boils down to the fact that it was two different guns. I'd have a much easier time believing it was a single shooter if it was the same type of gun, or if it was that blackout weapon and then perhaps a handgun that someone could carry on their person.
It really is a confounding point. Let's get to another question. This one's from Team Sofer from YouTube. Question, Rich, I'll send this one to you. How much of a heads up does the defense get on the evidence? Are there any surprises, or is it all disclosed to them in discovery?
It should be disclosed in discovery. They ought to have, first of all, the prosecution really can't put on exhibits that haven't been given to the defense in advance, or witnesses that haven't been disclosed to the defense. There ought to be, all of that should have been produced in discovery, should have been laid out in some kind of pretrial submission. And generally speaking, day to day, you get some sort of heads up as to who the next witnesses are going to be.
That's typically how it works. And of course, all of the evidence is that they're going to be presenting at trial. There's that old saying, there shouldn't be any surprises coming from the witness stand, but we know sometimes that there are. We're going to take a quick break now, but keep your questions coming to us both on Twitter and our YouTube chat, and we'll get to as many of them as we can. So stay with us as we take this quick break. For television, if you're watching on YouTube, we will be right back. It'll just be a couple of minutes. I'm Anjanette Levy, and you are watching Law and Crime.